Published 16:02 Eastern Standard Time, the 7th of March 2019. Updated 17:37 Eastern Standard Time, the 7th of March 2019. 7 months after his conviction on tax and bank fraud charges, former Donald Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort arrived at a federal courtroom to receive his jail sentence Thursday. Manafort, who has been held in solitary confinement in a Virginia jail, appeared in a green state-issued jumpsuit like the one he wore in his mugshot. After all the arguments, interrogations, and filings, Manafort was expected to verbally plead for leniency before Judge T.S. Ellis, CNN reported. He was seen inside the courtroom seated in a wheelchair and a cane. From the start of the hearing, Judge Ellis sought to establish that Manafort was not being punished for crimes having to do with Special Robert Mueller's probe of Russian election interference. Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman, is facing up to 24 years in jail for bank and tax fraud. Pictured leaving the federal courthouse in Washington last April, prosecutors have said they were looking into Manafort before Trump decided to hire him to helm his delegate counting and campaign effort. He is not before the court for anything having to do with colluding with the Russian government, said Ellis, CNN reported. But his later comments indicated Manafort wouldn't be getting breaks. The judge said he would not get credit for cooperating with prosecutors, or for his acceptance of responsibility. Prosecutors say he lied despite his promise to cooperate with the Mueller probe. Manafort, who was known to spend thousands each year on custom-tailored suits, and even a $15,000 ostrich leather bomber jacket, sported a jumpsuit that said Alexandria inmate. At the start of the case, the judge told an anecdote about previous cases where he has been hard on convicted criminals. He noted that in prior centuries they hung pickpockets in Great Britain. Lawyers on both sides sparred over Manafort's failed effort to secure a $5.5 million construction loan to update his Brooklyn brownstone. The loan was also a source of contention at trial. When Judge Ellis urged prosecutors to focus on a loan that was granted, prosecutors argued that Manafort failed to disclose he already had a loan on the home, and overstated the income of his firm by $2 million to get it. The former Trump advisor, who once strode the globe, helped install foreign leaders in power, stashed funds in offshore havens, and burned through money on tailored suits and Persian carpets, is looking at a sentence that could put him behind bars for the rest of his life. He was convicted in August on 8 counts of bank fraud, filing false tax returns, and failing to disclose a foreign bank account as he stashed millions abroad. Prosecutors say he failed to pay more than $6 million in taxes, even as he spent lavishly buying himself fine suits and even an ostrich jacket. Judge Ellis' comment about collusion immediately evoked Manafort's August trial, where the judge issued comments from the bench that were sometimes critical of prosecutors and the evidence they assembled. At one point the judge admitted, "I may have made a mistake by tearing into prosecutors for allowing a government tax expert to be seated in the courtroom, even though prosecutors had obtained advance permission." The judge said he was probably wrong, with prosecutors recommending he spend 24 years in jail for the corruption charges a jury convicted him of committing. Manafort is positioned to spend more time in prison than any figure yet in Trump's orbit to face prosecution. Trump's longtime lawyer Michael Cohen is soon reporting to jail. Manafort's actions since his trial 7 months ago have not helped his situation. Federal prosecutors accuse him of repeatedly lying despite his pledge after his conviction to cooperate in the wide-reaching Mueller probe. Manafort has shown no remorse and blames everyone but himself, prosecutors say. His sentencing will be another milestone in an investigation that began before Trump decided to bring on the longtime power broker who represented a wealth of shadowy clients. Attorneys, L&C, for Paul Manafort, former campaign manager of President Donald Trump, arrive at the U.S. District Court in Alexandria, Virginia, on March 7, 2019 for sentencing in Manafort's fraud case. A member of the defense team for former Donald Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort arrives at the U.S. District Court for a sentencing hearing in Alexandria, Virginia. Federal prosecutors said in a court filing 2 days ahead of his sentencing hearing Thursday that Manafort, 69, has not taken any responsibility for his crimes. He was convicted last summer of 8 financial crimes including tax and bank fraud. Judge T.S. Ellis was to decide on Manafort's sentence. Manafort's wife, Kathleen Manafort, who also attended his trial, was present in the courtroom. Manafort was one of several key figures who attended the infamous June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians, although he has not been charged with any crime connected to the sit-down, which also included Donald Trump Jr. and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. According to a court document that was unsealed in January, Manafort shared polling information during the campaign with Konstantin Kilimnik, a business associate who has been tied to Russian intelligence. Prosecutors with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office said on Tuesday that Manafort blames everyone from the Special Counsel's office to his Ukrainian clients for his own criminal choices. They added that Manafort was under investigation by the Justice Department before Mueller was appointed Special Counsel in May 2017. The filing was aimed at persuading a judge to reject Manafort's pleas for leniency. At Thursday's sentencing hearing in Alexandria, Virginia, where he faces up to 24 years in prison, prosecutors with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's, pictured in 2007 testifying in Capitol Hill, office said on Tuesday that Manafort blames everyone from the Special Counsel's office to his Ukrainian clients for his own criminal choices. Tarnished legacy. Paul Manafort Sr. was three-term mayor of New Britain, Connecticut. A $15,000 ostrich leather bomber jacket, included in the government's exhibits admitted into evidence, in Manafort's trial in Washington, D.C. Jackets included in the government's exhibits admitted into evidence, at the trial of President Donald Trump's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, are seen in this combination image of pictures released from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office in Washington, D.C., U.S. On August 1, 2018, prosecutors wrote, Manafort suggests, for example, that but for the appointment of the Special Counsel's office, he would not have been charged in connection with hiding more than $55 million abroad, failing to pay more than $6 million in taxes, and defrauding 3 financial institutions of more than $25 million. Manafort was convicted in August of 8 financial crimes in the Virginia case. He faces another sentencing hearing later this month following a guilty plea in Washington, D.C. Manafort's youngest daughter, Andrea Manafort Shand, had written a letter pleading for leniency, calling her father a living example of selfless and generosity. But her older sister Jessica did not submit a letter on her father's behalf. And in hacked texts between the two published by Business Insider in 2017, Shand was less generous, saying he has no moral or legal compass and that the family fortune was earned from blood money. Manafort banked millions representing clients such as Moscow-backed Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Paul Manafort's daughter Andrea Manafort Shand wrote a letter on his behalf. Prosecutors also rejected Manafort's argument that his age of 69 should be taken into account, saying he can and should receive proper medical care in prison. Sentencing calculations call for a punishment of up to 24 years. Whatever sentence he receives will be by far the longest punishment given so far to any of the defendants charged in Mueller's nearly 2-year investigation. Last week, lawyers for Manafort asked a judge in Virginia for leniency to reduce his recommended 24 years of jail time. Manafort worked as President Trump campaign chairman. Pictured the president speaking before the signing of an executive order on veteran suicide. Paul Manafort is now a multiple felon. His convictions are from a trial and a guilty plea. Here is the complete list. On August 21, 2018, by a jury after trial at federal court in Alexandria, Virginia, found guilty of 5 counts of submitting false tax returns, 2 counts of bank fraud, 1 count of failing to disclose a foreign bank account. The jury did not reach a verdict on 10 more charges on September 14, 2018, ahead of a trial at federal court in Washington, D.C. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States, 1 count of witness tampering. And the plea deal, Manafort agreed to cooperate and pleaded guilty to 10 other charges, with the deal saying those would be dropped if he completely cooperated. But he did not completely cooperate, meaning he is also going to be sentenced for 3 counts of failing to disclose a foreign bank account, 2 counts of bank fraud, 5 counts of bank fraud conspiracy. His legal team argued that Manafort chose to go to trial on the charges in Virginia even after Mueller declined to give a reasonable plea offer. They asked the judge to take into account the fact that Manafort is a first-time offender as well as consider his agent health. In Virginia, he was convicted by a jury of 8 felony counts in a tax and bank fraud case, and he has been in jail since last June. On August 21 last year, he was found guilty of 5 counts of submitting false tax returns, 2 counts of bank fraud and 1 count of failing to disclose a foreign bank account. Manafort pleaded guilty last year to 2 felony counts, conspiracy against the United States and conspiracy to obstruct justice, related to his illegal lobbying. The plea came after a jury in a separate case in Virginia convicted Manafort on 8 financial charges involving the hiding of millions of dollars from the IRS that he made overseas. As part of the plea agreement, Manafort agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors, but late last year, Mueller's team said he had lied to federal agents and a grand jury. His lawyers also dismissed prosecutors' characterization of Manafort as a hardened criminal, saying he was merely a wealthy consultant who committed garden-variety crimes by illegally lobbying for Ukrainian interests and hiding millions from the IRS. The Virginia sentence will likely be stronger than what he'll face in the Washington criminal case, where he accepted a guilty plea deal and admitted to 1 count of conspiracy against the United States and 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. That case stems from illegal lobbying he carried out on behalf of Ukrainian interests and a meeting with Konstantin Kilimnik, a business associate who the U.S. says has ties to Russian intelligence. Manafort was a longtime political consultant who once led Donald Trump's presidential campaign, but hasn't been accused of any crimes related to Russian election interference. But court papers have revealed Manafort gave Kilimnik polling data related to the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. A Mueller prosecutor also said that an August 2016 meeting between the two men goes to the heart of the Russia probe. The meeting involved a discussion of a potential peace plan between Russia and Ukraine, but many other details about it have been redacted in court papers. Guilty. Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to making false statements in December 2017. Awaiting sentence, Flynn was President Trump's former national security advisor and Robert Mueller's most senior scalp to date. He previously served when he was a 3-star general as President Obama's director of the Defense Intelligence Agency but was fired. He admitted to lying to special counsel investigators about his conversations with a Russian ambassador in December 2016. He has agreed to cooperate with the special counsel investigation. Guilty. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to 8 counts including fraud and 2 campaign finance violations in August 2018. Pleaded guilty to further count of lying to Congress in November 2018. Sentenced to 3 years in prison and $2 million in fines and forfeitures in December 2018. Cohen was Trump's longtime personal attorney, starting working for him and the Trump Organization in 2007. He is the longest-serving member of Trump's inner circle to be implicated by Mueller. Cohen professed unswerving devotion to Trump, and organized payments to silence 2 women who alleged they had sex with the then-candidate, porn star Stormy Daniels and Playboy model Karen McDougal. He admitted that payments to both women were felony campaign finance violations, and admitted that he acted at the direction of candidate 1, Donald Trump. He also admitted tax fraud by lying about his income from loans he made, money from taxi medallions he owned, and other sources of income, at a cost to the Treasury of $1.3 million. And he admitted lying to Congress in a rare use of the offense. The judge in his case let him report for prison on March 6 and recommended he serve it in a medium-security facility close to New York City. Guilty. Paul Manafort found guilty of 8 charges of bank and tax fraud in August 2018. Pleaded guilty to 2 further charges. Awaiting sentence, Manafort worked for Trump's campaign from March 2016 and chaired it from June to August 2016, overseeing Trump being adopted as Republican candidate at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. He is the most senior campaign official to be implicated by Mueller. Manafort was one of Washington, D.C.'s longest-term and most influential lobbyists, but in 2015, his money dried up and the next year he turned to Trump for help, offering to be his campaign chairman for free, in the hope of making more money afterwards. But Mueller unwound his previous finances and discovered years of tax and bank fraud as he coined in cash from pro-Russia political parties and oligarchs in Ukraine. Manafort pleaded not guilty to 18 charges of tax and bank fraud but was convicted of 8 counts. The jury was deadlocked on the other 10 charges. A second trial on charges of failing to register as a foreign agent is due in September. Guilty. Rick Gates pleaded guilty to conspiracy against the United States and making false statements in February 2018. Awaiting sentence, Gates was Manafort's former deputy at political consulting firm DMP International. He admitted to conspiring to defraud the U.S. government on financial activity, and to lying to investigators about a meeting Manafort had with a member of Congress in 2013. As a result of his guilty plea and promise of cooperation, prosecutors vacated charges against Gates on bank fraud conspiracy, failure to disclose foreign bank accounts, filing false tax returns, helping prepare false tax filings, and falsely amending tax returns. Guilty and jailed. George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to making false statements in October 2017. Sentenced to 14 days in September 2018, and reported to prison in November. Served 12 days and released on December 7, 2018. Papadopoulos was a member of Donald Trump's campaign Foreign Policy Advisory Committee. He admitted to lying to special counsel investigators about his contacts with London professor Joseph Mifsud and Ivan Timofeyev, the director of a Russian government-funded think tank. He has agreed to cooperate with the special counsel investigation. Guilty and jailed. Richard Pineda pleaded guilty to identity fraud in February 2018. Sentenced to a year in prison. Pineda is a 28-year-old computer specialist from Santa Paula, California. He admitted to selling bank account numbers to Russian nationals over the internet that he had obtained using stolen identities. He has agreed to cooperate with the special counsel investigation. Guilty and jailed. Alex van der Zwaan pleaded guilty to making false statements in February 2018. He served a 30-day prison sentence earlier this year and was deported to the Netherlands on his release. Van der Zwaan is a Dutch attorney for Skatten Arps who worked on a Ukrainian political analysis report for Paul Manafort in 2012. He admitted to lying to special counsel investigators about when he last spoke with Rick Gates and Konstantin Kilimnik. Guilty. W. Samuel Patton pleaded guilty in August 2018 to failing to register as a lobbyist while doing work for a Ukrainian political party. Awaiting sentence. Patton, a longtime D.C. lobbyist, was a business partner of Paul Manafort. He pleaded guilty to admitting to arranging an illegal $50,000 donation to Trump's inauguration. He arranged for an American straw donor to pay $50,000 to the inaugural committee, knowing that it was actually for a Ukrainian businessman. Neither the American or the Ukrainian have been named. Charged. Konstantin Kilimnik indicted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to obstruct justice. At large, probably in Russia. Kilimnik is a former employee of Manafort's political consulting firm and helped him with lobbying work in Ukraine. He is accused of witness tampering, after he allegedly contacted individuals who had worked with Manafort to remind them that Manafort only performed lobbying work for them outside of the U.S. He has been linked to Russian intelligence and is currently thought to be in Russia, effectively beyond the reach of extradition by Mueller's team. Indicted. The Russians. 25 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities have been indicted for conspiracy to defraud the United States. They remain at large in Russia. 2 of these Russian nationals were also indicted for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 11 were indicted for conspiracy to launder money. 15 of them were also indicted for identity fraud. Vladimir Putin has ridiculed the charges. Russia effectively bars extradition of its nationals. The only prospect Mueller has of bringing any in front of a U.S. jury is if Interpol has their names on an international stop list, which is not made public, and they set foot in a territory which extradites to the U.S. Indicted. Michael Flynn's Business partners Pidge and Kean left number 2 and now disgraced former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn's lobbying company, and the two's business partner Ekam Alptekin, Wright, were indicted for conspiracy to lobby illegally. Kean is awaiting trial. Alptekin is still to appear in court. Kean, an Iranian-American, was arrested and appeared in court charged with a conspiracy to illegally lobby the U.S. government without registering as a foreign agent. Their co-conspirator was Flynn, who is called person A in the indictment and is not charged, offering some insight into what charges he escaped with his plea deal. Kean, vice president of Flynn's former lobbying firm, is alleged to have plotted with Alptekin to try to change U.S. policy on an exiled Turkish cleric, Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania and who is accused by Turkey's strongman President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of trying to depose him. Erdogan's government wanted him extradited from the U.S. and paid Flynn's firm through Alptekin for lobbying, including an op-ed in The Hill calling for Gulen to be ejected. Flynn and Kean both lied that the op-ed was not paid for by the Turkish government. The indictment is a sign of how Mueller is taking an interest in more than just Russian involvement in the 2016 election. Indicted, Roger Stone, a former Trump campaign official and longtime informal advisor to Trump, was indicted on 7 counts including obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and lying to Congress about his communications with WikiLeaks. Stone was a person of interest to Mueller's investigators long before his January indictment, thanks in part due to his public pronouncements as well as internal emails about his contacts with WikiLeaks. Campaign texts and emails, many of which had already been publicly revealed before showing up in Mueller's indictment. Stone communicated with associates about WikiLeaks following reports the organization had obtained a cache of Clinton-related emails. Stone, a former Nixon campaign advisor who has the disgraced former president's face permanently tattooed on his back, has long been portrayed as a central figure in the election interference scandal, but as recently as January 4 told DailyMail.com that he doesn't expect to be indicted. "They got nothing," he said of the special counsel's investigation. According to the federal indictment, Stone gave false and misleading testimony about his requests for information from WikiLeaks. He then pressured a witness, comedian Randy Credico, to take the Fifth Amendment rather than testify, and pressured him in a series of emails. Following a prolonged dispute over testimony, he called him a rat and threatened to take that dog away from you, in reference to Credico's pet Bianca. Stone warned him, "Let's get it on. Prepare to die."